Death completes a person, isn't that right? These were the words uttered by Kaido, the king of the beasts, as he stood before the Akazaya Nine, men who had crossed time itself for a chance to die at his feet. It's a line that has been repeated, analyzed, and debated endlessly within the fandom. But one thing that's often ignored, a detail that changes the way you would look at it, is the punctuation. It's often repeated as a definitive statement, a core tenet of his philosophy. But in actuality, it was a question posed by a man who could not die to men who were prepared to. This subtle distinction changes everything. It reframes the entire concept from a declaration into an inquiry, a desperate search for meaning from a being who has outlived his own. When we think of death, we often see it as a singular binary concept, a switch being flipped. We stop breathing, we close our eyes, and that's the end of that. But in a series like One Piece, what does it actually mean to die? In a world that encompasses dreams, that transcends lifetimes, a world where the central driving force is the concept of inherited will, a world where the very power system, Haki, is a manifestation of spiritual energy, a representation of life force itself. Death cannot be a simple conclusion. It must mean something more. To die in a physical sense is one thing, but what does it mean to die in a metaphysical one? Kaido's question hangs over the entire narrative, not as an answer, but as a challenge to the very way we understand finality in a story built on the foundation of endless continuation. Now, I know why you're here. The title is very provocative to say the least. It suggests an end for one of our own, one of the Strawhats. And I promise you, this isn't just cheap clickbait, I think. But aside the back jokes, and before we can even begin to answer that question, we can't really start with the Strawhats. We can't even start with One Piece. We have to start with the very ideas that give the story its soul. We have to take a journey through philosophy, through the concepts that have guided human thought for millennia, and understand what it means to live, to die, to leave something behind. So, welcome to Theory Corner, a place where we discuss the story behind the stories, where we look at alternative pathways, different meanings, and try to get an upside-down view of the mind of the authors. At the heart of many Eastern philosophies, particularly Taoism, is the concept of the Tao, or the Way. It's not a god or a deity, it's the natural, spontaneous, and eternal process of the universe. The Tao is the uncarved block, the formless potential from which all things arise and to which all things must return. It is the rhythm of life, the flow of water, the changing of the seasons. Taoism teaches that wisdom comes not from struggling against this flow, but from embracing it. This is the principle of Wu Wei, often translated as inaction or effortless action. Doesn't mean being lazy, but acting in perfect harmony with the natural course of things, like a boatman steering his vessel through the currents, rather than trying to fight against them. In this worldview, life and death are not opposing forces in a grand war. They are parts of the same single cyclical process. They are yin and yang, two inseparable aspects of a unified whole. Death is not an end, but a transformation, a return to the Tao, a release of one's individual form back into the formless potential from which it came. To fear death in a Taoist sense is to fear the river returning to the ocean. It's a misunderstanding of one's place in the natural order. This idea is woven into the very DNA of One Piece through its most central theme, inherited will. A person's dream, their will, does not vanish when their body does. It flows into the next generation, inherited by those who share the same spirit. Dr. Hiruluk did not truly die when he drank the poison. His will to save a country, symbolized by the cherry blossoms, was inherited by Chopper. Goldie Roger did not die on the execution scaffold. His will, his dream of freedom and discovery, ignited the Great Pirate Era and was inherited by countless pirates, most notably Luffy. In this Taoist sense, to truly die in One Piece would mean for one's will to be extinguished, for the dream to have no one left to carry it forward. It is a death of legacy, a metaphysical erasure, a true return to nothingness because the flow has been stopped. Now, Buddhism offers another complementary lens, one centered on the concept of anicca, or impermanence. The core teaching is that everything, every object, every emotion, every living being is in a constant state of flux. Nothing is permanent. The self, as we perceive it, is not a fixed, solid entity, but a temporary collection of constantly changing physical and mental components. The attachment to the idea of a permanent self, the clinging to things as if they will last forever, is the root cause of all suffering, or dukkha. Death in this context is the ultimate, undeniable expression of impermanence. It's not a failure or tragedy to be feared, but a fundamental truth of existence that must be accepted with wisdom and grace. The goal is not to escape death, but to escape the cycle of suffering by extinguishing the attachments that bind us to it, thereby achieving nirvana. These ancient ideas aren't just an intellectual exercise, but they are the very river of thought that flows beneath the story. Every character, every dream, every conflict is a boat sailing on this river. Some are rowing against the currents, clinging to the idea of permanence in a world that promises none, while others have learned to ride the waves, embracing the flow of inherited will. And as we look at our crew, we can see each of them navigating this in their own ways. Zoro, a man who embodies Buddhist philosophy. We see him try his luck against the cursed Sandai Kitetsu, throwing it into the air to see if his arm would be severed, which wasn't an act of simple recklessness, but an act of profound acceptance, a surrender to fate and the flow of things. It was a demonstration of anicca in action. He did not fear the impermanence of his own body, because his will, his dream, was more real to him than his own arm. His Ashura manifests a demonic three-headed six-armed deity, a powerful being from Buddhist and Hindu mythology, often locked in an internal battle with the Devas. It is a manifestation of his spirit, his ambition so powerful that it takes on a physical, godly form. In its ultimate title, the King of Hell is a direct reference to Enma, the Buddhist king and the judge of the underworld. Zoro constantly walks the line between the living world and the world of the dead. However, his dream to become the world's strongest swordsman is a dream that, paradoxically, requires him to defy impermanence. It is a dream of achieving a form of permanence in a world that promises none. To be the strongest is not an abstract concept. It is a title held by a living person, a mountain that all other swordsmen must attempt to climb. His death before achieving this would negate the very foundation of his ambition, leaving the promise he made to Kuina forever unfulfilled. His story, therefore, is about using the acceptance of impermanence as a tool to achieve a state of physical permanence. He must live to become the undisputed one. This need for physical permanence to realize a dream is a thread that runs through most of the crew, often as a way to find emotional solace or to correct a past trauma. We as humans often cling to the idea of physical permanence as a comfort against the chaos of life. We build monuments, we write our names down, we seek achievements, all in an effort to say, I was here and I mattered. This is powerfully reflected in Minami. Her dream is to draw a map of the entire world. This is an act of pure creation, a willfully exuberant expression of her freedom. A child spent in repression, forced to draw maps for her captors, her creativity chained to their greed. Her dream is to chart their physical world, to make it known, to hold it in her hands. For her, the map is not just paper and ink. It is proof that she is no longer a prisoner, proof that the world is hers to explore, a permanent record of her freedom, a physical anchor against the emotional impermanence of her traumatic past. It can only be completed through her continued physical existence. Similarly, Nico Robin's journey is one of finding a reason to exist, both physically and metaphysically. Her initial dream to learn the true history was, in her own words, a dream with too many enemies. She believed her existence was a sin, and her dream was a path to a death she felt she deserved. The cry of, I want to live, at Enies Lobby was a fundamental shift. It was a declaration that her physical existence had value, not because of her knowledge, but because of the bonds that she had with her friends. Her dream is no longer a path to an end, but a reason to continue. For her to die prematurely would be to tragically undermine the single most important moment of her entire life. It would be a regression to the belief that she was never meant to exist at all, a cruel joke played by the universe. Her story is about finding will to live and the demands that she be allowed to do so. This theme further continues with the crew's other specialists, with Chopper's dream to be able to cure any disease is rooted in the physical reality of suffering. It's a direct response to the loss of his father figure and a desperate desire to prevent others from experiencing that same pain. His dream is tied to the tangible, to the mending of bodies, the preservation of life. It is a dream that requires his continued presence as a doctor, a physical agent of healing in the world. With Frankie's dream, to build a capable of circumnavigating the globe, his dream is embodied in the Thousand Sunny, a physical testament to his skill and his will. His role is as a caretaker, to see it to the end of the journey. His physical presence is tied to the permanence and the success of the ship he poured his soul into. And Jinbei's dream is one of creating a human fishman utopia. This is a dream of profound social and political change, a goal that requires a leader, a representative, a figure of immense respect to guide the two races toward a shared future. This dream is rooted in the idea of building a permanent, lasting peace, a task that requires his wisdom and his physical presence as a bridge between two worlds. He must be there to see the sun shine on his people in the world above. And then we have Sanji, the left wing of the Pirate King. Sanji's dream is finding the All Blue, a mythical sea, a chef's paradise. But his journey is so much more than that. It's a profound exploration of identity, what it means to be human. His character is steeped in devil symbolism with his Diabo Jambe. His fiery range, his very origins as a genetically engineered prince, a failed experiment of a man who played God. Sanji's entire life has been a battle against destiny that was forced upon him. He is a man who was told he wasn't human, but a tool, a number. His kindness, his chivalry, his very passion for cooking. These are all acts of rebellion. They are ways of him screaming to the world, I am human, I feel, I love. His dream of the Old Blue is not just about finding a place. It's about finding a state of grace, a personal haven that proves his hellish past does not define him. For Sanji, physical existence is paramount. He needs to feel the heat of the kitchen to taste the food he creates, to see the joy in the faces of those he feeds. His humanity is expressed through these physical, sensual acts. For him to die prematurely would be to allow the cold, sterile, inhuman destiny his father had planned for him to win. And then we go to Usopp, the man who many believe is the one to die. His dream is to become a brave warrior of the sea. Now, on the surface, this seems simple, but Usopp's definition of bravery is one of the most complex in the entire story. It's not about becoming the strongest like Zoro, or being the most free like Luffy. For Usopp, bravery is a moral act. It's the ability to stand by your ideals, to face your terror, and to act in spite of it. His entire journey is a war against his own nature. He's a coward who desperately wants to be a hero. More than anything, his dream is tied to his promise to Kaya, that he will return to her as a great pirate and tell her true stories of his adventures. This promise is the anchor for his entire journey. It's his reason for enduring, and in fulfilling it, he will become the overcomer or the generational tick of his father, who scurried away from responsibility and commitment. Usopp's dream, in a way, is also to prove that he is not his father, that he can live proudly like the giants, and most importantly, love proudly, returning to the person he made a promise to. His dream requires a return. It requires a physical homecoming, a final chapter where the liar becomes the storyteller, the boy becomes the man, and the wounded soldier goes back to his beautiful maiden. His story demands a life lived to completion. And what's of our captain, Monkey D. Luffy? Well, we all know that his dream is to be the Pirate King. To him, it is synonymous with being the freest man on the seas. But his existence seems tied to something even beyond that. He's the ultimate embodiment of the Taoist flow. He is not just following in Roger's footsteps, but he is the river that Roger's will flows into. His freedom is so absolute that it seems to transcend even the metaphysical barriers of the world. The freest man on the sea is also free from the conventional limitations of life and death. His will so powerful, so infectious, that it seems impossible to imagine it ever being extinguished. Like the sun god he embodies, his existence is a cyclical, life-giving force. His Gear 5th is not just a regular power-up, but a philosophical statement, the power to impose the impossible, the absurd, the joyful onto reality itself. It's the laughter that drowns out sorrow. For Luffy to die in a conventional sense would feel like a contradiction to the very core of his character. His story is about a will that cannot be contained by a single lifetime. He is the flow itself. So, as we drift down this river of thoughts, passing by those who cling to the banks of permanence, we are left with one soul who has already been claimed by the current, a man whose entire existence is a paradox of life and death, a man whose story began with his own end. Brook. Death defines Brook in a way that is utterly unique from the rest of the Strawhats. He is already dead, as he so often jokes. His devil fruit, the Yomi Yomi no Mi, is a cosmic joke, a loophole in the laws of nature. He gave him a second chance, but it did so by trapping him in a state of living death. He is a soul tethered to a skeleton, an immortal being who has already experienced his own end. A living ghost, a walking contradiction. His first life was defined by a single, binding promise to return to the well, Laboon. that promise, that inherited will, was carried for 50 agonizing years in the darkness, a testament to his loyalty. But upon meeting Luffy, and beforehand, that will had been translated. Luffy had taken on the burden, marking Laboon with a Straw Hat Jolly Roger, creating a new promise for the future. In that moment, the Taoist flow of inherited will had inadvertently been completed for Brook's first life. The river had reached its destination. So, what is he now? He is a man in overtime. He's living a life beyond the one he was promised. A bonus round, if you will. And in this second life, his relationship with the metaphysical has become his strength. His ability to separate his soul from his body, his power to command the chill of the underworld, which are not just techniques. They are a sign that he has mastered the boundary between the physical and the spiritual. He's not defined by the need for physical permanence, because he has already lost it and gained something far more profound. His dream is not just about Laboon, but it's mostly about seeing his new friends achieve their dreams. He has found a new purpose, a life through self-fulfillment in the service of others. He has moved from a personal binding promise to a shared, liberating one. And herein lies where the emotional weight of a true final death could be staggering and beautiful. For the man who could not die to choose to die, the man who has already experienced the loneliness of the end to willingly embrace it for the sake of his friends. It would not be a tragedy in the same way as the others, but a completion. It would be the ultimate expression of his love for his new family, a final definitive act of self-fulfillment. His first death was an accident, a tragedy born of poison and despair. His second death would be a choice, a sacrifice, a victory. It would be the final poignant note in the song of his life, a song that he's been composing for over 90 years. It would be the ultimate act of Wu Wei, not fighting against his fate, but embracing a final perfect action in harmony with his love for his crew. Imagine the scene, the Straw Hats in an impossible situation, a final battle where the only path to victory, the only way to ensure Luffy becomes the Pirate King, requires a sacrifice that no one else can make. Only Brook, the Soul King, whose very nature transcends the physical, could perform such an act. A final song, a final slash, having seen his second family to the dawn that they fought for. It would be the most heartbreaking yet thematically perfect end for any character in the series. So, this brings us back to the question from the beginning. Death completes a person, isn't that right? For most, death is an interruption, an incompletion of a dream. But for Brook, a man who has lived 2 lives, a man who has already fulfilled one promise, and is now helping to fulfill the dreams of others, a final, meaningful death would be the one thing that could truly complete him. It could be the ultimate answer to Kaido's question, not as a statement or fact, but as a lived, chosen experience. It would prove that the meaning of death is not found in its inevitability, but in the will and the love that one pours into the life that precedes it. The true permanence is not in the body, but in the echo of the will left behind, a song that, once it's sung, can never truly be silent.